Mom, I want to run away from my wedding. On the eve of the wedding, Margaret called Margaret's mom who was overseas. Margaret's mom was stunned for a moment. Knowing her daughter well, she didn't ask further questions and readily agreed. All right, since mom is getting older, this family business will have to be handed over to you sooner or later. The earlier you come, the sooner you can adapt, Margaret responded with feigned nonchalance. Yet her body involuntarily turned to look toward the bridal chamber. Through the hazy window shadows, she could just make out two entwined figures. One is her fiancé, the other is her stepsister. She struggled desperately to maintain composure, yet her voice inevitably carried a hint of choking sobs. Margaret's mom sighed. I thought that boy was different. Never imagined he'd follow the same path as your father and me. It's all right, Margaret. You're still young. Mom will wait for you. After exchanging a few pleasantries, they hung up the phone. When the surroundings grew quiet, Margaret could no longer hold back and collapsed by the roadside, weeping uncontrollably. The bright moonlight stirred up endless sorrows. Before tonight, she too had thought Vivian was different. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. They grew up together as childhood sweethearts and officially became a couple at 18. Vivian was the epitome of a refined young master from an elite scholarly family, polite, modest, and exceptionally handsome. As the future heir of the Wordsworth family, he had always carried himself with more composure than his peers since childhood. In the 10 years since they became a couple, they never had a single argument. Vivian always treated Margaret like an elder brother, showering her with care and affection. Flowers were sent by the cartload, and jewelry was bought by the handful. Vivian was almost entirely at her beck and call, never failing to fulfill her every whim. Their friends often remarked that although Vivian wasn't much of a talker, he loved Margaret with all his heart. They were the model couple in their circle, the envy and aspiration of everyone. Unfortunately, tonight's engagement party shattered Margaret's 10-year-long dream. Vivian invited the last person Margaret ever wanted to see in her life, her stepsister, Jane. The moment she saw Jane, all the painful memories came flooding back like a tidal wave. She thought of how this mother-daughter pair had provoked her relentlessly, driving Margaret's mom to the brink of suicide. She thought of all the bullying and abuse she had endured over the years. The usually gentle Margaret lost her composure in public. She shouted about kicking Jane out. Jane remained unmoved, instead deliberately provoking Margaret by bringing up Margaret's mom. The two argued endlessly, throwing the engagement party into chaos. Margaret instinctively sought Vivian's help as usual. Before she could speak, Vivian slapped her in public. If you're drunk, go home and rest. Don't make a scene here. Look at yourself. How could you possibly be worthy of becoming the future lady of the Wordsworth family? Witnessing Vivian's actions, Margaret's father not only failed to defend Margaret but also criticized her. Your sister just returned from abroad, and as the elder sister, how can you be so petty? If Aunt Ding gets upset over this, I won't let you off the hook. In front of everyone, the two of them Margaret berated mercilessly. Then Vivian left with Jane without a second glance, leaving Margaret behind to endure the crowd's mockery and criticism. I don't know if it was the alcohol or the overwhelming sense of humiliation. Margaret flushed crimson and fled the engagement party as if escaping. Taxis were hard to come by at night. She wandered the streets alone in a daze for over 3 hours. The cold wind gave her a splitting headache as she finally made her way back to Moonview Villa. Just as she reached the downstairs, Margaret saw two people in her bridal chamber, locked in a tight embrace, whispering sweet nothings to each other. She checked the surveillance footage, piecing together the clues until she finally uncovered the truth. It turned out that during all those years she'd been unaware. Vivian and Jane shared a chapter of absurd history. 8 years ago, Vivian, in an attempt to shed her second-generation heiress label, started her own business but faced bankruptcy after investment failures. At his lowest point, he met Jane in a youth hostel. In just 1 month, Jane replaced Margaret, his childhood sweetheart, becoming the most important person in Vivian's heart, simply because the Wordsworth family could not accept a daughter-in-law of such background. Vivian settled for Margaret, yet still devoutly kept Jane hidden in her heart. She believed they were childhood sweethearts, destined by fate. In truth, it was merely a substitute rising to power through calculated compromises. Margaret's feet were worn bloody, and her heart was shattered to pieces. The slap mark on her face was like a brand of shame. It shattered decades of affection and love. She made up her mind to give up the man she had loved for over a decade. But this wedding, Margaret had been anticipating for over a decade, carrying all her youthful fantasies about the future and love. It was also the belief that kept her going through her darkest days. She refused to let all her painstaking preparations go to waste for the sake of these two. So she decided to use this wedding to draw a perfect conclusion to her decade-long relationship, then completely sever ties with her biased family and faithless lover, make a clean break, after venting her emotions. Margaret took out her phone and booked a flight ticket for 7 days later. After the ticket purchase was confirmed, the phone automatically switched back to the surveillance screen. Perhaps it was fate. Margaret happened to hear Vivian's long-buried true feelings. He said, "Jane, I regret it, in my youthful ignorance. I mistook sand for pearls. If you're willing to turn back, I'm ready to break off the engagement for you. If you refuse, I'll still treat her kindly for Margaret's sake. As she bears some resemblance to you, even though she had already resolved to leave, even though she had already witnessed his betrayal with her own eyes." Yet upon hearing these words, Margaret's heart still trembled violently. She lowered her gaze, the lingering affection between them seemed ready to spill from the screen. Jane appeared drunk, offering no response as she lay lazily on the sofa. Vivian, who had just criticized Margaret for drinking as lacking self-respect. Vivian now actively prepared sobering soup for Jane and patiently fed it to her. Jane turned her head away and kicked Vivian in a huff. "Who'd want to marry you anyway?" Vivian wasn't the least bit annoyed. Instead, she grabbed Jane's foot and began massaging it. Jane smiled contentedly. "I know your status prevents you from marrying me. And I also know you've never forgotten me all these years. This wedding suite was decorated to my taste. The ring was chosen according to my preferences. Even the high heels she's wearing were ones I discarded." As she spoke, she rested her head against Vivian's chest. "It's all right, I don't care about titles. As long as I remain the one in your heart, that's enough for me. I'll never leave you again. I'm willing to stay by your side in another capacity." Witnessing this scene, Margaret clutched her phone with white-knuckled intensity. Her heart ached as if being torn apart. The most painful part was that despite already knowing the answer, she still secretly hoped Vivian would uphold her principles at the last moment. The next second, the previously silent Vivian suddenly stepped forward on her own. She kissed Jane on the lips. With a lingering, passionate kiss, she poured out the love she had buried deep within for years. Margaret could no longer hold back. She trembled all over, tears streaming down her face. They had been in love for 10 years, and every time he took the initiative to kiss Vivian, Vivian would turn her head away. At that time, Margaret thought Vivian was shy and reserved. Little did she know, he had saved all his passionate love for Jane. For 10 years, the two shared a bed every night, entwined in countless moments of passion. Vivian had always kept a chaste devotion in her heart for his white moonlight. Margaret's nails dug deeply into her palms, the intense pain nearly suffocating her. She looked down at the high heels beneath her feet. This was Vivian's engagement gift to her, adorned with countless dazzling crystal diamonds, priceless, as beautiful as a dream. Margaret loved it. Unfortunately, the shoes were a size too small, grinding her feet bloody along the way, so she only pondered for 3 seconds before taking off her shoes and throwing them into the trash bin. Ill-fitting shoes, no matter how beautiful, aren't worth clinging to. An unsuitable marriage, no matter how loving, isn't worth turning back for. Just as she was about to hail a taxi and leave, Vivian appeared behind her at some point, calling out her name. Margaret turned her head. The moment their eyes met, Vivian immediately released Jane's hand. Upon seeing Margaret's swollen red cheek, a flicker of guilt flashed in her eyes. "Are you sober now? I didn't mean to hit you. I just wanted to snap you out of it before things got out of hand." Margaret looked toward Jane's direction. Vivian instinctively began to explain. "Don't overthink it. Jane had too much to drink. It's not safe for a girl to walk alone at night, so I brought her to my place. She's your sister. It's only right that I take extra care of her. Besides, she's a sensible and well-mannered girl. She insisted on leaving first precisely because she didn't want you to misunderstand or overthink things when you returned." Usually taciturn Vivian became unusually talkative whenever Jane was mentioned, and every word was in her defense. Margaret gazed at this man she'd known for over 20 years and suddenly found him a stranger. They were clearly childhood sweethearts who grew up together. Clearly she was the one who accompanied Vivian through the hardships of starting a business as his fiancé. Why, in the end, had she become the substitute instead? She couldn't understand it, nor did she want to think about it anymore. After all, there are only 7 days left before departure. Margaret no longer needs to endure endlessly for the sake of so-called family harmony. She stared at Jane and spoke the words buried in her heart for over a decade. "She's not my sister, she's the bastard child of a homewrecker." As soon as these words were spoken, Jane showed no reaction, but Vivian flew into a rage. The term mistress seemed to strike a nerve in him. It made him forget even the ingrained sense of propriety, as he shouted at Margaret, "Margaret, what nonsense are you spouting? Apologize to Jane right now. Born with a father but raised without a mother, no wonder neither of your parents wanted you." Your bitter and mean-spirited look is truly disgusting. No wonder you'll die unloved. After 10 years together, Margaret had never once raised her voice at Vivian. In a single day, he lost his temper with Jane twice. He wielded words like a sword, thrusting straight into the most vulnerable part of Margaret's heart. Every word strikes the heart like a fatal blow. Margaret even thought she must have misheard. How could such hurtful and ugly words come from Vivian's mouth? She looked up, only to see Vivian carefully shielding Jane behind her. That nervous demeanor was exactly the same as back then. Back then, Jane's mom rose from being the other woman to replace Margaret's mom, then subjected Margaret to all kinds of abuse. Margaret's father turned a blind eye to it all, every time. It was Vivian from next door who rushed over to shield Margaret with her own body. He would stand up for Margaret to seek justice, would hold Margaret in his arms to comfort her. When Margaret doubted herself, he would firmly say, "Margaret, you're the best person in the world. If they don't want you, I do. No matter what happens, I'll always stand by your side to protect you." Years passed in a flash. The youthful promise became a mere jest. Vivian now seeks to protect, no longer Margaret, but the one who hurt her, Jane. She tried desperately to remain composed, but tears fell uncontrollably. The pain in my heart was so intense that I couldn't even muster a single word of rebuttal. Seeing Margaret's anguished expression, Vivian realized her words had gone too far. Guiltily avoiding Margaret's gaze, his eyes fell upon her continuously bleeding foot. "You're hurt." After knowing each other for so many years, Vivian couldn't help feeling reluctant. He sighed slightly. "Forget it. Let's just consider tonight's words as drunken nonsense. From now on, there won't be any from now on." Margaret interrupted softly. "What?" Vivian felt that Margaret was acting somewhat strange, but too much had happened today, and his heart was completely occupied by Jane, leaving little energy for Margaret. He was about to press further when he suddenly heard Jane's cries. "Sister, do you hate me so much? Forcing me to go abroad isn't enough. Must you drive me to death? Fine, I'll die then, so I won't burden Vivian brother anymore." Jane ran toward the road, weeping. The night was deserted, without a single car in sight, yet Vivian was still unbearably nervous. He cast aside all his doubts and guilt, hurrying after Jane. Margaret was knocked to the ground by Vivian, tiny gravel embedding into her bleeding wound. The successive blows left her without even the strength to cry. The so-called 10 years of mutual love were merely her own wishful thinking. Childhood sweethearts are no match for destiny's sudden arrivals. Nor could she compare to that Vivian's cherished moonlight kept deep in her heart. After a long while, Margaret staggered to her feet and limped back to her room. Dragging her injured foot, after tending to her foot, Margaret threw away all the carefully selected wedding supplies. She hesitated when she saw the wedding countdown in the living room, then tore off the word wedding from it, quietly changed it in my heart to a countdown to departure. There were too many scattered belongings. Margaret kept packing until 4 a.m., before finally falling asleep, slept for less than 3 hours before being abruptly awakened by a sharp phone ring. "Margaret, are you awake? I ordered your favorite soup dumplings for you. I won't be coming back today. We'll reschedule the wedding photo shoot. Something urgent came up at the office. I really can't get away." Margaret rubbed her throbbing temples and responded in a muffled voice. Okay, perhaps it was because she agreed too readily, or perhaps her voice sounded too sorrowful. Vivian felt a hint of unease in her heart, and her tone softened slightly. "Don't dwell on what happened yesterday. I've already apologized to Jane on your behalf." Jane said the wedding is just a show for appearances. No need to take it too seriously. After all, our relationship is so strong, we don't need external things to prove anything. Keeping it simple is best. Whatever you say. Margaret had already made up her mind. This would be the simplest wedding in history. No wedding photos, no marriage certificate, no officiant, and no bride. After hanging up the phone, Margaret stood up and used a marker to cross out the wedding photo shoot entry on the calendar. Vivian was very busy with work. Margaret couldn't bear to disturb him on weekdays, so when preparing for her wedding, she deliberately bought a wish calendar. She wrote down all the things she had most wanted to do over the years in this calendar, hoping to fulfill all her wishes at once while getting married. Now these wishes that were never meant to come true have been thickly crossed out with a marker. They've become unspoken regrets buried deep in her heart. Margaret let out a soft sigh as she glanced around, surrounded by nothing but glaring, dazzling red. She spent the entire day cleaning out what was once their meticulously decorated wedding home. By evening, however, she spotted Vivian trending at the top of hot searches. To win a beauty's smile, doting husband Mr. Vivian splurges $8 million on antique pearl brooch. The photo was too blurry. Everyone thought Vivian's companion was Margaret. Margaret let out a bitter laugh. So this was where the wedding savings had gone. But it didn't matter anymore. Margaret would no longer grieve over Vivian's affairs. For the next few days, Vivian did not return home. Margaret did not inquire about Vivian's whereabouts as she usually would, nor did she make arrangements for him. She submitted her resignation to the company and bid farewell to a few close colleagues. Over the next few days, she gradually contacted her friends to share the news of her upcoming move abroad. Her friends exchanged glances and sighed in unison. "We actually all saw this coming." One of them opened Vivian's social media feed and handed it to Margaret to look at. "Strangers would think the person in the photo is you, but we could all tell it was Jane." Margaret finally realized that all this time, Vivian had been with Jane. The usually inactive Vivian had posted several updates in a single day just for this occasion. The two went to the amusement park to relax, tried on wedding dresses at the bridal shop, and watched the moon and stars from the mountaintop. Vivian's love for Jane is open and generous. Only, Margaret was blocked. Seeing Margaret remain silent, their friends grew somewhat concerned. "Margaret, are you okay? There's no need to be sad over someone like that, Vivian. Such a person isn't worthy of your love at all. If he ever discovers Jane's true colors, he'll surely regret it bitterly." Margaret smiled and turned her gaze to the bustling street outside the window. "I'm fine, I don't care anymore, but there's something I need to ask you to help me with. In just a few more days, she would be leaving this place forever." She had neither the time nor the energy to grieve for Vivian, so when Vivian, who had been absent for days, appeared before her, Margaret remained utterly indifferent. Vivian seemed genuinely busy. Ever since coming back, his eyes have been glued to his phone, his hands never stopping. Margaret sat beside him with her laptop, quietly transferring the surveillance footage to a USB drive. She wanted to prepare a big surprise for them before leaving. Midway through the transfer, Vivian suddenly looked up. He glanced around the house. "Why does it suddenly feel so empty? Didn't you decorate? You said to keep everything simple." Margaret wasn't the least bit worried Vivian would discover anything. Ever since Jane appeared, nothing else existed in his eyes. But this time, Vivian unexpectedly noticed the countdown in the living room. He smiled. "Time flies. We're getting married in 7 days." Margaret stood up and tore off 2 more pages from the calendar. "Our wedding is in 5 days. The wishes written on these 2 pages were ride a Ferris wheel together and watch the starry sky together. These 2 things Vivian had already done with Jane." Vivian felt an inexplicable pang in her heart, as if she had overlooked something important. She wanted to say something more. Margaret's phone rang. Seeing that Margaret's mom was calling, Margaret took her phone to the balcony. When she returned after the call, Vivian was still engrossed in conversation with Jane. Head bowed. "Whose call was that? I thought I heard something about a visa." "Nothing, just work stuff," Margaret dismissed casually. Vivian let out a sigh of relief. "That's good. Just don't plan any honeymoon trips. I absolutely don't have the time." "I know." Ever since Jane returned, Vivian had been clinging to her side almost 24/7, leaving no time for anything else. The two sat together, yet found themselves at a loss for words. Sinking into silence, a strange atmosphere began to spread between them. This inexplicably made Vivian feel somewhat uneasy, due to her special family circumstances. Margaret was very sensible and wouldn't cling to her boyfriend acting spoiled and willful like other young girls, but Vivian knew that being sensible was just her survival disguise. Margaret was, at heart, a clingy and love-starved little girl. Every time he returned before, Margaret would immediately throw herself into his arms, chattering endlessly about the day's events. Whether he responded or not, Margaret's words never stopped flowing. Now, this unusual silence made Vivian feel something was terribly wrong. He put down his phone and looked at Margaret. "You've been working so hard preparing for the wedding all this time. Once everything's settled," mid-sentence, Margaret suddenly cut him off. "Where's your wedding ring?" He froze for a moment. "I don't know when I lost it." After trying hard to recall, it seemed to be on the night of the engagement. Jane was unhappy seeing the wedding ring on his hand. To cheer her up, he casually took it off and set it aside. Then he never remembered it again. Vivian guiltily wanted to explain, but heard Margaret say dismissively, "If it's lost, it's lost. We can just buy a new one." Margaret didn't take this matter to heart. After she left, Vivian would naturally buy a new diamond ring for Jane. This one was destined to be discarded, sooner or later. What difference did it make? Vivian had long grown accustomed to Margaret's understanding and generosity, but this time, his heart felt inexplicably heavy, as if what he'd lost wasn't just a ring, but something far more important. To dispel this unease, he resolved to make proper amends to Margaret. "Since the company isn't busy today, I'll take you to pick a new one, a bigger one to reward you for all your hard work these days." Margaret frowned, just as she was about to say she didn't need it. Vivian's phone buzzed with a message. After reading the message, Vivian suddenly stood up and headed for the door. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly remembered something. turning back, he planted a kiss on Margaret's forehead. "I'm sorry, darling. I've been so busy lately that I haven't been able to spend time with you. I promise you, once this busy period is over, I'll make it up to you properly. I'll make you the happiest woman in the world, for the past decade." Vivian had never spoken such tender, lingering words of love to Margaret. He knew all women loved hearing these things. It's just that Margaret was too understanding. So understanding she didn't need to be coaxed, so naturally, he chose to comfort the tearful, demanding Jane instead. But he had wronged Margaret too much during this time. He could only try his best to treat Margaret better, to dispel the unease in his heart. Margaret remained silent all along, neither sorrowful nor joyful. Showing no emotion at all, after Vivian left, she went to the bathroom to wash her face, washing away all traces of Vivian, belated love, compensation after betrayal. She didn't want any of it. Time passed slowly like this. Soon it was the day before the wedding. The calendar had been torn until only 2 thin pages remained. Today's calendar wish reads, "Have a reunion dinner together." This was Margaret's long-cherished wish buried deep in her heart for over 20 years. Yet she knew all too well that this wish would never come true. Mother would never forgive father, just as Margaret would never forgive Vivian. Margaret didn't dwell on it too much. She applied light makeup and put on her favorite white dress. She went to the movies alone, ordered a full couple's set meal by herself, and rode the Ferris wheel solo. As the Ferris wheel reached its peak, the sun was setting in the west. The sun slowly set, casting a brilliant crimson glow over the city where she had lived since childhood. A gentle breeze brushed against her face. Margaret spread her arms wide, feeling as if all her memories had dissipated into the evening wind at that very moment. As night completely fell, Margaret bought one last ice cream and walked out of the amusement park. She sat on a nearby bench, eating her ice cream while gazing up at the star-filled sky. The starry sky above her was what she cherished most. During countless times when she was driven out of her home, it was always young Vivian who held her hand and lay with her on the grass to gaze at the stars. But it didn't matter, people around her might change, yet the starry sky above would remain the same, no matter where Margaret went. The dazzling starry sky would always stretch above her. After finishing the ice cream, Margaret got up to go home, but under the starry sky, she received a message from Jane. "Dad's sweet and sour fish is super delicious. You've never had it, right?" Margaret opened the video to see both sets of parents having a meal together. Vivian and Jane sat in the center, surrounded by festive red double happiness symbols. The two families discussed the wedding plans amidst laughter and joy. Margaret was not provoked by Jane's petty tricks. She had experienced too many similar things since childhood. She simply found it amusing, discussing the wedding. Whose wedding are they actually discussing? Is it Margaret's, or her Jane's? Margaret didn't want to waste words with Jane, so she directly blocked and deleted her, then opened Vivian's chat window. Their last chat record was still from a week ago. Margaret scrolled up through the dense chat history, almost all of which were sent by her. She never tired of sharing her daily life with Vivian. From major life plans to trivial daily meals, Vivian rarely replies. And the few responses she does give are all related to Jane. Margaret suddenly lost the desire to message Vivian. Since there was no reply for so long, there was no need to keep reaching out. Just as she was about to put her phone back in her pocket, she received a call from Vivian. "Where are you? Why aren't you home? It's so late, why haven't you come back yet?" Vivian's voice was urgent, laced with reproach. He had rarely turned down Jane's invitations before, but today he'd come home early, hoping to spend more time with Margaret. Yet when he opened the door, the one who always waited for him wasn't there. No answer to calls, no reply to texts. Vivian was so anxious she nearly called the police. Hearing Vivian's accusatory tone, Margaret checked the time, 8 p.m. In the past, Vivian would often be out busy until dawn, or not return all night. Every time, Margaret would silently leave a small light on for him. If Vivian had been drinking, Margaret would even drag herself out of bed, fighting sleep, to make him a sobering soup. But what had Vivian ever done for her? Margaret couldn't think of anything, and a hint of impatience crept into her tone. "Can't I have my own life?" This was Margaret's first time contradicting Vivian. He froze for a moment, then softened his voice. "Margaret, I've missed you these past days. We're getting married tomorrow. I'm just worried something might happen to you. Don't be mad. Wait for me sweetly. I'll be right there, soon." Vivian drove over and, unprecedentedly, brought Margaret a bouquet of flowers. She didn't take it. Opening the passenger door, a peculiar smell rushed at her. Margaret felt nauseous. He took out a tissue to wipe his hands and voluntarily sat in the back seat. Vivian was busy replying to messages with her head down, not noticing Margaret's unusual behavior. She only asked perfunctorily, "What made you think of going to the amusement park? Have you finished all the wedding preparations?" "Almost done. tomorrow, she could leave this place forever. Vivian smiled. I remember you've always wanted to ride the Ferris wheel. When I have time, I'll take you for a proper fun day. I didn't mean to disturb you today, it's just that my mother wanted to see you. It's alright, we'll have plenty of time in the future. Margaret had many wishes, and there would be plenty of time ahead. After going abroad, she would fulfill them one by one. It had nothing to do with Vivian. After replying to the message, Vivian started the car and casually played a song Jane liked. Margaret turned her head toward the bustling street. It was a beautiful city, neon lights flickered on, intertwining with the starry sky, but after staring too long, her eyes grew sore from the wind, leaving her quite uncomfortable. Upon arriving at the old house, only leftovers remained on the dining table. The housekeeper was clearing the table, while the parents from both families exchanged pleasantries. Vivian and Jane chatted and laughed. In the vast house, only Margaret felt like an unwelcome presence. Vivian caught a glimpse of Margaret's despondent figure and felt an inexplicable pang in her heart. He vaguely remembered that many years ago, he had sworn never to make this little girl sad again. After a moment of contemplation, Vivian had someone bring over several sets of formal dresses. Margaret, I know you've been quite busy these days, so I asked Jane to pick out a wedding dress for you. See if you like it. Jane approached with a playful grin. Big sister, I'm your bridesmaid. We'll appear together at the wedding, and everyone will see how dazzling we sisters are. Jane's father lovingly ruffled Jane's hair. Vivian also watched the father and daughter with a beaming smile. Only Margaret noticed the wedding dress before her, the yellowed color, the poor quality fabric. With a large tear right across the chest, yet Jane's bridesmaid dress, with its exquisite lace mermaid silhouette, accentuated her graceful figure, making her look more like a bride than Margaret did. Jane twirled around, beaming with joy. It's so beautiful, it would be perfect with a tiara, Vivian immediately said. What's so difficult about that? Margaret has one right there. As the elder sister, she surely wouldn't compete with you, her younger sister, as he spoke. He looked toward Margaret and also noticed the damaged wedding dress in Margaret's hands. How could this be? Seeing Margaret turn her gaze toward Jane, Vivian quickly stepped in front of Jane. It must be a mistake by the shop staff. It's not Jane's fault. I'll find someone to fix this for you right away. Jane feigned concern. But it's so late now, the bridal shop must be closed. Maybe we could find a second-hand dress for temporary use, after all. Sister originally wanted everything to be simple. Everyone turned their gaze simultaneously toward Margaret. For two wealthy and influential families, finding a brand new wedding dress wouldn't be difficult at all. It's just that compared to making a big fuss and going to great lengths, they would rather choose to let Margaret suffer a little. After all, she's used to being wronged. It's all right, don't trouble yourselves. You all have your own things to attend to, I'll handle it myself. Margaret smiled politely. With this smile, the previously tense atmosphere was instantly broken. Everyone continued chatting and drinking tea, with no one paying attention to Margaret's grievances. Vivian knew just how important the wedding was to Margaret. He was afraid to see Margaret's disappointed look, so he took out a bank card and handed it over. Don't worry about the money, as long as you're happy, anything goes. Margaret hesitated for a moment, took the bank card, and thanked Vivian. A simple thank you seemed to invisibly widen the distance between them. Vivian felt deeply uncomfortable, yet didn't know what to say. Nearby, Jane glanced at Margaret for a moment before retrieving a camera from the bedroom. Since we're all here together, let's take a family photo in advance. Tomorrow's wedding will be too noisy and chaotic, the pictures definitely won't turn out well. Vivian agreed without hesitation, taking Margaret's hand and standing right in the center. At the moment the shutter clicked, Jane suddenly stepped in front of Margaret. Margaret tripped over her and fell uncontrollably. Margaret, Vivian was startled and reached out to pull Margaret, but at this moment, Jane began to cry. He hesitated, but only for 3 seconds, before firmly choosing Jane again. Letting Margaret crash headfirst into the shelf, Vivian pulled Jane aside and gently wiped the tears from Jane's face. Don't cry, your sister has always been sensible, she won't blame you. The others quickly gathered around to show their concern, pointing at the photos in the camera to cheer up Jane. Margaret could only struggle to her feet by herself. A warm trickle slid down her face, whether tears or blood, she couldn't tell. She wiped with a tissue, and it came away bright red. But now, everyone was gathered around Jane. It wasn't until Margaret's forehead stopped bleeding that Vivian finally approached, camera in hand, head bowed. This photo didn't catch your face. Jane's pose isn't flattering either. Maybe we should retake it. Margaret, what happened to your face? Her face was bleeding, yet they were all concerned about how Jane's face looked unflattering in the photo. Margaret said indifferently, it's fine, no need to retake, it's getting late, I'm heading back first. What does it matter anyway? The wish to take photos together had long been crossed off her calendar by her. Margaret no longer wanted to engage in hollow pleasantries with these people and returned alone to Moonview Villa. After these days of effort, the originally festive and lively bridal suite had been turned by Margaret into something resembling a showroom. She tossed her wedding dress at the doorway. Pulling out her suitcase, she began packing the last of her belongings. She had known Vivian for far too long, so long that nearly everything was filled with memories of the two of them. That's why. Apart from the most essential items, she didn't want to take anything else with her. At dawn the next day, the makeup artist knocked on the door, about to leave soon. Margaret wanted to dress herself beautifully to welcome her new life ahead. Just as she sat down at the dressing table, Vivian hurried in. Jane's makeup artist cancelled last minute, and she's crying hard. Have your makeup artist go fix Jane's look first. No matter what, the bride should go do the bridesmaid's makeup first. Such an unheard of request left the makeup artist at a complete loss. Instead, Margaret nodded calmly and said, "Go ahead, I'm in no hurry." Though she agreed readily, Vivian felt deeply unsettled in her heart. On such an important day, she should have held on a little longer, or perhaps, like Jane, she could have made a scene. Margaret showed no reaction at all, as if she no longer cared about this wedding, or about Vivian as a person. This terrifying thought left Vivian utterly distraught. A notion even surfaced in his heart: if he left this time, might he never see Margaret again? But Father Fang's urging left him no time to dwell on such thoughts. "Margaret, I'll be back soon, I promise you, this is the last time." The last time. Margaret suddenly burst into laughter. It was indeed the last time. In just a few hours, she would board a plane bound for a foreign land, never to return in this lifetime. After Vivian left, Margaret stood up. She surveyed everything in the room. Over the years, Vivian had given her many gifts, from designer handbags and high-end dresses to fine jewelry, from dolls and plush toys to milk tea and gaming consoles. Without exception, every single one was Jane's favorite type. The once oblivious Margaret had treasured all these items dearly. Now she was systematically destroying each and every one with her own hands, cutting bags and clothes to pieces with scissors, smashing jewelry with a hammer, throwing all the dolls and toys into the trash bin. After completing all this, Margaret tore off the last page of the calendar. On it was written her greatest wish in life: wearing the most beautiful wedding dress, marrying my beloved Vivian. Now, the wedding dress lies in ruins, too hideous to behold. The one I loved most has also become unrecognizable. Margaret crumpled the paper violently into a ball and flung it away with force. The eastern sky began to pale with the first light of dawn. Margaret wiped away her tears and drew back the curtains, letting the early morning sunlight flood into the room. All that is past is as though it had never been. She put on her sunglasses and took a taxi to meet the media mogul her friend had introduced earlier, at their first meeting. She got straight to the point. "I have an exclusive story that could go viral nationwide. How much are you willing to pay for it?" The other person raised an eyebrow and extended 5 fingers. "If it's related to Mr. Vivian, I'm willing to offer this amount. I'll give you 5 million. But I have one condition: the content must be broadcasted across the entire internet the moment the wedding begins." "Deal." Margaret placed the bank card given by Vivian, along with that USB drive, on the table. Then, alone and empty-handed, she boarded the plane. Wedding venue. Vivian finally managed to calm down Jane. Yet all that surfaced in my mind were those emotionless eyes of Margaret as she left. That dreadful thought resurfaced once more. He wanted to go see Margaret. Those around him rushed forward to stop him. It's bad luck for the bride and groom to see each other before the wedding. Just wait a little longer, you'll have a lifetime to see each other. Vivian felt her heart skip a beat, but she stopped in her tracks nonetheless. Margaret was probably angry. No matter, once the wedding was over, he would patiently coax her back into good spirits. After all, they had their whole lives ahead of them to see each other. She had always been sensible and wouldn't stay angry for long. Thinking this way, Vivian felt slightly more at ease. Yet he waited until noon at 12 o'clock, not for Margaret's arrival, but for the news of the bride's runaway wedding. Meanwhile, the large screen meant to play their romantic video instead displayed footage of him with Jane. The sounds of intimacy echoed throughout the grand hall. Amidst the surrounding whispers, Vivian stood thunderstruck, frozen in place. The first thought that came to mind wasn't anger, but panic and fear. Margaret knows everything. No wonder her attitude has been so unusual lately. No wonder she would publicly flee the wedding, disregarding both families' reputations. She had known everything all along, but had been silently enduring it. Who put this video here? Who gave you permission to do this? Margaret. Where is she? Take me to her. Things aren't what she thinks. Vivian unusually blocked Margaret's friend. The man sneered. If not this, then what? Your pre-wedding videos. Why don't you think carefully about what you've been doing all this time? Faced with the relentless questioning, Vivian had no strength to refute. What had he been doing? He'd been fooling around with Jane all along. He hadn't participated in decorating their marital home, unaware there were surveillance cameras installed. Not only that, he didn't accompany Margaret for wedding photos, didn't try on wedding dresses, didn't choose a diamond ring. He failed to do anything a groom should have done. Vivian struggled to control her trembling hands. He completely lost his usual composure, frantically ordering his subordinates to find Margaret. 5 hours later, Vivian had learned nothing except that Margaret had gone abroad. He sat alone on the balcony, the cigarette between his fingers flickering in the dark night. Even now, Vivian still couldn't accept the fact that Margaret had jilted him at the altar. The tattered wedding dress was discarded at the doorway, just like their years of love, now reduced to trash alongside it. Vivian's mom called again. Vivian felt unbearably irritated. He wanted to hang up, but for some reason, his hands trembled violently. By accident, he answered the call. Margaret, where on earth has she gone? Don't you realize she's brought utter disgrace upon the Wordsworth family? I told you long ago we shouldn't have married that kind of woman. Even her own mother abandoned her. What decent person would do that? She's been twisted since childhood. A complete monster. She is not. Vivian couldn't take it anymore and interrupted Vivian's mom, as the eldest son that the Wordsworth family took pride in. This was the first time he had ever talked back to his elders. Not only that, but he had also brought shame upon the entire family. Franklin Group heir caught cheating with sister-in-law before wedding misses. Franklin makes bold escape from wedding. Such words dominate all trending searches. The stock price of Franklin Group plummeted uncontrollably within a single day. Years of hard work gone to waste. Everyone advised him to find Margaret and pin all the blame on Margaret. But Vivian couldn't do it. He had known Margaret since he was 7 years old, and he understood better than anyone just how wonderful Margaret was. Vivian, what on earth are you thinking? Your father and I are worried sick, with paparazzi and reporters hounding us everywhere. Are you really willing to abandon the entire family for a woman like this? For people of our standing, playing along with social niceties is perfectly normal. If she covets the wealth and power of the Wordsworth family, she should learn to endure in silence. How could she let momentary anger escalate things to this point? These words Vivian had already heard repeated 1,000 times in a single day. He rubbed his temples and said weakly, Mom, don't worry. Just give me some time. I'll handle this matter. How to handle it? Vivian was actually completely clueless. The mess this time was too big. The Wordsworth family's members all gnashed their teeth in hatred toward Margaret, but he just couldn't stand hearing anyone speak ill of Margaret. In his heart, he understood why Margaret was with him, and even more clearly why Margaret had left. She loved him. The deeper the love, the sharper the hatred. After finishing the last cigarette in her hand, Vivian slowly stood up. He walked to the living room to pour himself a glass of water, but accidentally tripped over the sofa and bumped into the cabinet. So this is how much it hurts. Vivian covered her forehead with one hand while fumbling to turn on the light with the other, just like during the day. The room was in complete disarray. The broken items were still scattered on the floor. Vivian noticed several cuts on her ankles, growing increasingly frustrated. She rummaged for the first aid kit but couldn't find it after searching for what felt like ages. Before this, all these things were Margaret's responsibility to keep and tidy. No matter how late it was, Margaret would always leave a small light on for him. She would magically produce his favorite meals as if by sleight of hand. She would clean the house spotlessly according to his preferences. She would patiently tend to his wounds whenever he accidentally got hurt. In a daze, Vivian heard Margaret's gentle voice in her mind, blow on it and the pain will go away. He felt as if Margaret was still by his side, gazing at him with those crescent moon eyes. Suddenly, the jarring ringtone shattered Vivian's illusion. He looked displeasedly at the caller ID, Jane. After a moment of hesitation, he still answered the call. Vivian, brother, sister will be okay, right? It's all my fault. In the past, Vivian would have been heartbroken upon hearing Jane cry like this, dropping everything to rush to her side and comfort her. But this time, Vivian found the crying unbearably grating. A thought suddenly surfaced in his mind. He had to find Margaret. No matter the cost, he would bring her back. Vivian hung up Jane's call and began frantically searching for traces left by Margaret. She left resolutely, taking nothing with her. The teddy bear she used to sleep with, the jade bracelet she adored, all sorts of matching couple rings, and those childish yet heartfelt letters from their youth. Everything, along with their beautiful memories, was smashed to pieces by Margaret. If it were someone else, doing all this might be out of spite. Perhaps it was to attract attention, but Margaret was different. After all these years of growing up together, Vivian knew that girl too well. This was her silent rebellion. It was the testament of a heart turned to ashes. He began numbly tidying the room, stubbornly convinced that if he restored everything to its original state, the lady of the house would return, until he saw the wedding ring that had rolled beneath the bed. At that moment, Vivian finally understood completely. Margaret would never come back. He had personally lost the girl whose heart and eyes were full of him. Meanwhile, Margaret, who had suffered from insomnia for so long, slept soundly on the plane. Only in Margaret's dreams does Vivian's figure still linger everywhere. At 7 years old, the two played house together. Vivian said she was the groom, and Margaret was the most beautiful bride. At 18, the two made their relationship official. Vivian held Margaret's hand and solemnly promised, "Margaret, I swear, I will rely on my own efforts to give you the grandest wedding. I won't just make you the most beautiful bride, but also the happiest woman." This is precisely why Margaret had been looking forward to this wedding so much. She couldn't bear to leave the wedding arrangements to outsiders. She wanted to do everything within her power to fulfill the promise they made when they were 18. Alas, the youthful affection had long since faded away with the passage of time. The dreams of youth ultimately became regrets. She and Vivian still couldn't reach a happy ending. After waking up, Margaret felt her headache had somewhat subsided. She gazed at the layers of clouds outside the airplane window when a sudden question drifted through her mind. When did Vivian and her feelings for each other begin to change? Was it before Jane appeared, or after Jane came into the picture? Margaret couldn't figure it out, nor did she dare to think about it. Vivian had permeated nearly her entire life, occupying all of her past, no matter how resolute one might be. Abandoning someone like this would be an excruciating pain for anyone, like tearing flesh from bone. So even after getting off the plane, Margaret lacked the courage to turn on her phone. As she stood bewildered on a foreign street, she suddenly heard a familiar voice. "Margaret." Margaret's mom waved excitedly at Margaret amidst a crowd of blonde, blue-eyed foreigners. Unable to contain her excitement, she ran towards Margaret in her high heels. She tightly embraced this daughter she hadn't seen for so many years. "Span, you've grown so much. I almost didn't recognize you. That's wonderful, you've gotten taller and more beautiful." Margaret's mom stroked Margaret's face with heartache in her eyes, as if trying to reclaim the lost years through this familiar countenance. Margaret also gazed tearfully at Margaret's mom. After so many years, they could finally reach through the screen to touch each other's warm skin. Decades apart had transformed her mother, no longer the resentful woman weeping on the sofa waiting for Joe's father to come home. Margaret's mom had traces of time at the corners of her eyes and brows, yet she shone more dazzlingly than in her youth. "Mom, I've missed you so much." Margaret leaned into Margaret's mom's embrace, shedding her sensible demeanor and revealing the delicate charm of a little girl. Margaret's mom held her daughter tightly, repeating "I'm sorry" over and over again. "I shouldn't have left you alone. I thought, Franklin, someone could be with you. But I never expected. Who could have known that men in this world are always so unreliable?" "Mom, I don't blame you. You taught me not to just wait to be loved, but to learn to love myself, even during the hardest years." Margaret never resented Margaret's mom. She knew how difficult it was for a woman to make up her mind to leave the past behind. She also knew that those moving forward couldn't afford to keep looking back. If it were her, she wouldn't want to set foot in that quagmire again either. 20 years ago, Margaret's mom, and 20 years later, Margaret both made the same choice. Margaret's mom nodded with relief. After hesitating for a moment, she finally spoke. "Margaret, Vivian couldn't reach you and called me instead." Hearing that name, Margaret felt an inevitable pang in her chest. Margaret's mom grasped her slightly cold hand. "Mom still says the same thing. Whatever choice you make, I'll support you." Margaret mustered her courage and pulled out her phone. The screen was packed, almost entirely with Vivian's messages and missed calls. After a brief moment of contemplation, just like when she'd thrown away those high heels, she decisively tossed the SM card into the trash bin. "What's past is past." Margaret's mom wiped her tears and smiled, patting Margaret on the shoulder. "Well said, it's all in the past. Let's not dwell on unhappy things. Come on, let's go home." Margaret's mom adored this daughter she hadn't seen for years to the utmost. On the day Margaret was leaving the country, she busied herself with all sorts of packing and preparations. The mattress had to be soft and supportive for her back. The sheets and duvet covers needed to be comfortable against her skin. Seasonal clothes filled the entire walk-in closet. Even when she saw Margaret making breakfast in the kitchen after waking up, she couldn't help but cry out in heartache. "How could you do these things? Where's Auntie Coral?" Margaret skillfully fried the sunny-side-up eggs. "Mom, don't bother Auntie Coral. I can handle these things myself. Over the years, I've mastered quite a few skills. You'll get to taste my cooking soon." Vivian disliked having outsiders disturb the household, so she had never hired a housekeeper all these years, after work. Margaret also had to take care of Vivian's 3 meals a day and all the trivial household chores. She felt it was only natural to give more for the one she loved. Margaret's mom nearly shed tears upon hearing this, her heart aching. How much hardship have you endured all these years? Margaret had been sensible since childhood. No matter what happened, she always shared only the good news and never the bad. Margaret's mom knew Margaret was deeply devoted to Vivian. Over the years, she had repeatedly brought up the idea of bringing Margaret over, but each time, Margaret couldn't bear to part with Vivian, and the matter was left unresolved again and again. But, if she had known earlier Margaret was living this kind of life, even if it meant forcibly separating the lovebirds, she wouldn't have let her daughter suffer such hardship. Mom, we agreed no one is allowed to dwell on the past anymore. Margaret ladled a bowl of century egg and lean pork congee and placed it before Margaret's mom. She didn't consider it hardship at all. Love is often feeling like you owe more. When she loved Vivian, she always felt she hadn't given enough, never calculating whether the other returned equal love. Had she not witnessed Vivian's passionate and unreserved favoritism toward Jane, she might have kept loving foolishly like that forever. Alright, let's not mention it anymore, anyway. My daughter is the best, let those who failed to cherish her live with regret. After dinner, Margaret's mom dumped all the jewelry she had accumulated over the years into Margaret's hands. Margaret slipped a massive diamond ring onto her finger, thinking it looked far more stunning than her wedding band. Just as she was admiring it, the doorbell rang. The moment she opened the door, Margaret froze in place. She never expected Vivian to come looking for her, let alone for it to happen so quickly. Vivian was someone who always put career first, no matter what. There was a time when Margaret ran a high fever and wanted Vivian to take her to the hospital, but Vivian, busy handling documents in the study, merely spared 3 seconds to call for help even as Margaret burned into unconsciousness. From beginning to end, she never once stood up or uttered a single word of concern. Margaret found it hard to believe that this Vivian would abandon the mess back home and travel thousands of miles to find her way here. Come home with me. Vivian's face showed no expression, but her attitude was resolute beyond doubt. Margaret disliked his tone of speaking and frowned. This is my home. This aloof and detached demeanor instantly pierced Vivian's heart. He thought of Margaret's final glance, recalling that sense of something slipping away within him. He realized what he had lost. It was that adorable, childish Margaret who always loved to chatter and cling to him. Suddenly, he felt an intense suffocation, desperately grasping at the air around him and the person before his eyes. Margaret, stop joking around. I know you saw the surveillance footage, none of that was real. Just absurd words spoken in a moment of anger. Vivian unexpectedly lowered her head and sincerely apologized to Margaret. I'm sorry, Margaret. I've been too busy lately and neglected your feelings. I promise it won't happen again. You must believe that no matter what, I truly love you and never meant to hurt you. After speaking these words, Vivian herself was stunned. Before coming, he had been furious, swearing in his heart to teach Margaret a harsh lesson and make her learn the proper conduct of being Mrs. Franklin. But the moment I saw Margaret, everything else was forgotten. He simply couldn't bring himself to utter a single word of reproach to that face. Margaret smiled, with 7 parts indifference and 3 parts mockery. Vivian, you don't need to put on this act of deep affection. I know you married me out of duty, not love, so I chose to leave, to make way for you and Jane. To Vivian, these words sounded more like a petulant tantrum. He sighed and spoke, as if deceiving himself. Margaret, don't say such angry words. I know you ran away from the wedding to get back at me, to grab my attention. You still have feelings for me, you love me too much. You're resentful about my recent neglect, so you're deliberately doing this. It's alright, I'll forgive you. As long as you come back with me, you'll still be Mrs. Franklin. I'll handle all the troubles for you. Jane, I'll pay more attention to that too. Looking at Vivian, who was so self-righteous, Margaret was momentarily speechless. She remembered when she was young and had thrown tantrums out of immaturity. In order to get Vivian to care more about her, Margaret had cried, made scenes, and even run away from home. But no matter what she did, Vivian remained coldly indifferent, unmoved. She wouldn't coax, wouldn't scold, and wouldn't even get angry. She simply waited indifferently, as if nothing had happened, for Margaret to return and apologize. After this happened many times, Margaret gradually learned to be more sensible. At this very moment, she had matured enough to no longer need Vivian in her life, so she spoke calmly from the perspective of an observer. If it's true love, then surely you can overcome all obstacles to be together. What are these trivial difficulties before you? I believe you can conquer them. Only, Vivian, you've already gotten what you wanted. Why bother crying in front of me? Vivian was stunned. Only when raising a hand did she belatedly realize 2 teardrops had slid down her cheeks. He stared in disbelief at the glistening teardrop on his fingertip. He could actually cry. For Margaret. As he stood frozen, Margaret slammed the door shut with force. A loud bang, the teardrop on his fingertip trembled twice before shattering silently. Behind the door, Margaret couldn't help but let her tears fall. After all, she was a flesh and blood human being, not an emotionless machine. She couldn't just snap her fingers and erase all the memories of the past. She thought again of that Pandora's box of a video. The disgusting and humiliating truth lingered like a nightmare that wouldn't fade. In Vivian's heart, Jane was a ray of light during his darkest days, the most vivid stroke of color in his otherwise bleak life. He only remembered Jane bringing him a love at first sight that lasted eternally, an experience that haunted his dreams. With tender words, he expressed his nostalgia and gratitude for Jane. He completely forgot about the efforts Margaret had put in during that time, while Vivian and Jane were enjoying the most beautiful moments of their lives. It was Margaret who spent all her savings to cover Vivian's business losses. She was the one who went door to door apologizing to clients and partners, enduring all kinds of humiliation, just to beg for another chance for Vivian. For Vivian, Margaret did almost everything. She knelt and kowtowed to people on the snow-covered ground, drinking and socializing in a smoke-filled room. To secure a deal, she could drink herself into a miscarriage and hospitalization. Margaret still remembers that when she woke up that day, her first thought wasn't to ask about her condition, but to happily send a message to Vivian. Don't worry, the company is saved. Vivian didn't reply. Thinking back now, Vivian must have been busy making love with Jane, exploring new horizons together. Margaret's mom walked down the stairs and saw Margaret leaning against the door, crying alone. She hurried over and embraced her daughter in her arms. Margaret, don't cry. Tell Mom what's wrong. The person outside the door had already left, Margaret, but the thorn in her heart would remain forever. She threw herself into Margaret's mom's arms and finally spoke the words buried deep in her heart. Why does he like Jane so much? What's so great about Jane anyway? Their meeting was love at first sight. But what does our 10 years together even mean? He kept Jane hidden in his heart, lying to me that he wanted to remember those miserable years as motivation. In truth, the only one he wished to remember was Jane. Hearing Margaret's sobs, Margaret's mom felt her heart was about to break. She gently patted her daughter's back, yet couldn't utter a single word of comfort. All words seemed hollow and inadequate in the face of such overwhelming emotion. As someone who's been through it, Margaret's mom understood. People always grow up through pain and tears. She couldn't share her daughter's heartbreak, but could only silently protect her in her own way. Margaret cried for a long time, as if trying to drain all the water from her brain in one go. Fortunately, after crying, she suddenly understood many things clearly. She tossed and turned all night, feeling there were some things she needed to properly clarify with Vivian, not for Vivian's sake, but for the past 10 years. After calming her emotions, Margaret used a payphone to call Vivian. After leaving Margaret's place, Vivian felt as if a piece of her heart had gone missing, like the adorable, naive girl in his memories. She was drifting further and further away from him. When he saw that unfamiliar phone number, Vivian assumed it was yet another call urging him to return home. He wanted to hang up, but an inexplicable force within him compelled him to answer. The moment he heard Margaret's voice, Vivian felt answering this call was the most correct decision he had made in a long time. But the next second, Margaret's words sent him plunging into an icy abyss. It mercilessly shattered all his beautiful expectations and fantasies. She said, "Vivian, I don't love you anymore. I'm grateful for the kindness you showed me during the hardest time of my life, and for that, I'm willing to forgive all the hurt you caused me. As for that USB drive, let's just call it even. I called to tell you that running away from the wedding wasn't my revenge, it was my choice. I chose to let you go, to abandon our relationship and our past. From now on, we owe each other nothing. I hope we can both find peace and never meet again." Until the call ended, Vivian couldn't utter a single word. Margaret loved fiercely and unreservedly. Then, upon discovering the betrayal, she retaliated without mercy and left decisively. In the end, she could bid farewell generously and end things with grace. As if nothing had happened, she rushed toward her own new life. But Vivian, what about him? What should he do? That was a full 20+ years of emotions. Vivian fumbled for the cigarette in her pocket, trembling as she pulled out a lighter to light it. 1 click, 2 clicks. The lighter just wouldn't spark. Furious, he wanted to throw the lighter away, but at the moment of release, he suddenly remembered this lighter was a gift from Margaret. Their names were even engraved on it. Back then, Vivian had mocked Margaret for being ridiculously childish. But now, where had that childish girl gone? Vivian immediately picked up the lighter. Looking at the dent left from being thrown, she irritably ran a hand through her hair. He never imagined that one day Margaret would actually leave him. All these years, Margaret had always been so obedient and understanding, never losing her temper or complaining. Vivian knew Margaret loved him, and he had grown accustomed to Margaret's love. He couldn't imagine what life would be like without Margaret, even less willing to return to that cold and empty home. 10 years of love. 20 years of knowing each other, with such deep emotional bonds. How could he possibly walk away without debts or regrets, each going their separate ways in peace? He refused to accept it. He was determined to reclaim what he had lost. Vivian gazed at the unfamiliar street and said with firm determination, "Margaret, I don't believe you can just walk away from this 10-year relationship so easily. If I could make you fall in love with me 10 years ago, I can certainly do it again now. I'll prove my love to you, and when that time comes, nothing will be able to keep us apart." After hanging up the phone, Margaret was about to head home when she looked up and saw Margaret's mom waving at her from a sports car. The child has grown up, has their own thoughts, and won't even share their heart's words with Mom anymore. Margaret was amused. "Mom, it's all over now." She had already made things very clear to Vivian. She knew that someone as proud as Vivian would never lower their head to come looking for her again. "All right, to celebrate my precious daughter's rebirth, Mom's taking you out for some real fun." The sports car made a U-turn and headed straight for the Central Mall. No matter what it was, as long as Margaret glanced at it twice, she wouldn't hesitate to buy it. She spent money like water, without batting an eye. Vivian showered all her favoritism upon Jane, while Margaret's mom gave Margaret the same in her own way. After shopping, Margaret's mom suddenly flashed a sly smile. "Taking you to a fun place." Margaret was puzzled, but froze upon reaching the destination. Margaret's mom took her to the largest local bar, ordered the most expensive package with a grand gesture, and summoned a group of male models, each with broad shoulders, narrow waists, and 8-pack abs. Even every conceivable skin tone was represented. Margaret's mom poured Margaret a glass of strong liquor. "See, this is what life's about. With so many men in the world, what's one Vivian worth?" Margaret's mom never feared loving the wrong person or taking the wrong path. As long as she had the courage to start over, nothing was ever too late. Having never been to a bar before, Margaret felt a bit shy, but after a few drinks, she gradually let herself go. She swayed freely on the dance floor, letting alcohol wash away her inner sorrows and the electrifying music sweep all her troubles away. By the second half of the game, Margaret's mom couldn't hold on any longer. Margaret was still full of energy. Margaret's mom didn't want to spoil the fun, leaving Margaret with 2 reliable bodyguards. After giving a few instructions, she went back to rest first. Margaret played until the event was almost over, then staggered out supported by the bodyguards. The moonlight was hazy, the starry sky brilliant. Margaret sat down on a roadside bench to rest as a buzzing noise filled her ears. The evening breeze was cool, and a thoughtful bodyguard draped a coat over Margaret. "Let's go home." Drunk and disoriented, she suddenly stood up and nearly collapsed onto the ground. Fortunately, the bodyguard was quick-eyed and quick-handed, catching Margaret in time. Just as Margaret was about to express her gratitude, she suddenly caught a familiar scent of pine resin. Before she could get a clear look at the person before her, the bodyguards had already surrounded them with wary expressions. "Margaret, come home with me." Vivian struggled to suppress the fury burning within her. All day long, he had been pondering ways to make Margaret happy. He ordered 999 roses, bought Margaret's favorite strawberry cake, and even hid a new diamond ring inside the cake. Yet when he arrived with the gifts, he was mercilessly mocked by the Fang family's housekeeper. Everything he had meticulously prepared was thrown into the trash. Vivian was snubbed, and by evening, she heard from Ted, the assistant, that someone had spotted Margaret at a bar. He rushed over immediately, only to witness this very scene. The successive provocations had pushed his fury to its peak. He tried his best to maintain his composure and rationality, but Margaret nearly made him lose control with just a single flippant remark. "Who do you think you are?" Upon hearing these words, Vivian was nearly driven to fury. He grabbed Margaret's wrist tightly. "I'm your husband, come home with me." One of the bodyguards immediately became aggressive, and several others fell into a standoff. Margaret signaled the bodyguards to calm down, looking at Vivian with clear eyes. "I'm asking, who the hell are you?" The real meaning behind these words was, "Who are you, and what gives you the right to interfere in my affairs?" Vivian really disliked Margaret acting this way. It felt unfamiliar and unsettling. His emotions were gradually spiraling out of control. "Margaret, would you stop messing around already? I know you're doing this just to provoke and spite me, but can't you have some self-respect? I don't want to see you debasing yourself like this." "Margaret, I forgive your infidelity, forgive your betrayal, come home with me." Must you continue down this path of degradation? Margaret paused for a moment, then laughed in sheer exasperation. She adjusted her coat, not even bothering to refute his words, only replying coldly, "What makes you think I need your forgiveness? I saw you dancing with a shirtless white guy, arms around each other. What else could that be if not cheating? Margaret, don't forget your status. This isn't where you belong. I forgive you because I love you. Just think about your circumstances if you lose me. Do you really think you could find a better man?" This lofty heir of the Wordsworth family would actually stoop to competing with a male model for Margaret's attention. Unfortunately, in Margaret's heart at this moment, Vivian couldn't hold a candle to those male models from earlier. At least they genuinely brought Margaret some joy. She said impatiently, "Vivian, listen carefully, we've already broken up. Who I date and what I do is none of your business. Instead of lecturing me, you'd better figure out how to clean up your own mess." Margaret couldn't understand where Vivian got the nerve to point at her so self-righteously. In Vivian's heart, kissing Jane on the eve of his wedding didn't count as cheating. It's not considered cheating to miss Jane while Margaret was hospitalized for a miscarriage. Molding Margaret into a substitute for Jane doesn't count as cheating either. Yet Margaret merely went to a bar after the breakup and was branded as a heinous betrayer. How shameless and ridiculous. Margaret refused to say another word and had her bodyguard drive her home. Vivian chased after her. He watched Margaret's thin yet resolute figure under the moonlight, speaking unwillingly, "Margaret, we've all made mistakes. Why can't we be generous and forgive each other? After more than 20 years of feelings, can you really forget them just like that?" A gentle breeze blew past, scattering Margaret's fleeting sorrows. She didn't turn back, speaking calmly, "Yes, they can be forgotten. When you cheated with Jane, didn't you completely forget about me too? What you could lose, I can too. So, don't waste any more time on me. Go back, be with Jane or whoever else. Just stop bothering me." Margaret is looking forward and moving forward. She's not like Vivian, who always clings to what's behind. Only when Margaret's figure completely vanished into the night did Vivian return to her residence in a daze. The entire way back, she was in a muddled state. She never imagined that the girl she once knew could one day become so unrecognizable. 1,000 indescribable sorrows flooded her heart. Before she could even sit down to think, she heard Ted, the special assistant, deliver an extremely urgent report. "Jane has committed suicide." The scandal of the bride's escape was too big. And with the Edmund family fanning the flames behind the scenes, the Wordsworth family used all their connections but still couldn't completely quell the matter. "Miss Ding had been trying to get news about you, but she couldn't reach you." On top of enduring prolonged cyberbullying, she, in a moment of despair, took her own life by overdosing on pills. Vivian was deeply troubled. "How is the person?" "They were resuscitated and are out of danger." Ted, the assistant, felt that Vivian's reaction today was highly unusual. In the past, anything related to Jane had always been of utmost importance to Vivian. Vivian wouldn't hesitate to cancel billion-dollar contracts or abandon crucial meetings for Jane, even to the point of leaving behind her own fiancé. But this time, Jane's suicide, such a monumental event, Vivian has shown no particular reaction at all. Ted, the assistant, recalling Vivian's mom's instructions, tentatively spoke up, "Mr. Vivian, you've been here for quite some time now, and there are many matters awaiting your attention at the group headquarters. The recent incident has left several shareholders dissatisfied with you. Some are even planning to unite and remove you from your position. Coupled with Miss Ding's unfortunate accident, the intention is for you to return to the home country as soon as possible." Vivian's mom put it bluntly, "Don't waste your energy on people who aren't worth it anymore." But this particular message, Ted the assistant dared not convey. When Jane first appeared, those in the company who knew the inside story were all speculating whether Vivian would break off the engagement for Jane. After all, Vivian's favoritism toward Jane was something they all saw clearly. No one expected that in the end, it would be the usually submissive Margaret who would flee the wedding and abandon the marriage. Combined with Vivian's recent behavior, Ted, the special assistant, had already figured it out in his heart. This childhood sweetheart and first love remains the truly irreplaceable person in Vivian's heart. There may be many confidants like Jane in one's life, but Vivian would always consider Margaret as the only Mrs. Franklin in her heart. Vivian also fell into deep thought. He knew Ted the assistant's words were not alarmist. The Wordsworth family's current status was earned through generations of hard work, and it must not be destroyed by his hands. He also knew that returning home now would mean there was no possibility left between him and Margaret. Giving up Margaret was something Vivian couldn't do. He paced back and forth in the room, conjuring countless possibilities in the shortest time. Losing Jane would leave him heartbroken and nostalgic. Imagine if we lost Margaret. Vivian dared not continue the thought. unable to imagine what life would be like without Margaret. Finally, he made his choice. Give me another 2 weeks. Back then, Margaret abandoned everything she had in just half a month and left alone. Now, Vivian will also spend half a month trying to bring Margaret back. If she can't, Vivian silently clenched her fists. He refused to believe in any notion of fate running its course, much less accept such a possibility. All he knew was that, no matter what, he couldn't bear a life without Margaret in it. Vivian began pursuing her like a love-struck teenager, persistently sending Margaret flowers and gifts. The trash bin outside the Fang family's door suddenly became a treasure trove. Margaret's mom complained, after all these years, men's little tricks haven't improved one bit. It's not that they haven't improved, it's that he refuses to put in the effort. Margaret lowered her head with a faint smile. Even now, Vivian still doesn't understand what she truly wants. She had never lacked these material possessions, nor had she ever cared for them. All she wanted was a pure love, a heart that would never change. Margaret, don't dwell on those unpleasant things. Come work at my company instead. It'll help distract you and give you a chance to grow. Margaret's capabilities are beyond doubt. She had always been the top student every year during her school days, but later, for Vivian, she gave up the opportunity for further education, turned down offers from major corporations, and settled for a trivial job, wasting her own talents. Now, it's time for her to rediscover her true self. Margaret looked up and smiled resolutely, saying, "All right." Margaret's mom swiftly handled Margaret's onboarding, directly appointing her as general manager. Margaret lived up to expectations, quickly bonding with the company staff. Once, Vivian called her childish, boring, and incapable of doing anything right. Now her colleagues find her adorable, fun, and highly competent at her job. She could effortlessly earn everyone's recognition and respect, with even many senior employees praising Margaret's diligence and hard work. A close colleague couldn't help but ask her, "Margaret, you're a rich second-generation heir, why work so hard? You're always the last one working overtime, making us poor second-gen folks feel ashamed of ourselves." Margaret treated everyone to milk tea, then she joked, "Because if you don't work hard, you'll have to get married and have kids, be tormented by a wicked mother-in-law, despised by your husband, confronted by mistresses, and looked down upon by the whole family. Ha 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 ha, Margaret, you're so funny. A girl as outstanding and beautiful as you must have a crowd of suitors wherever you go. Who would dare treat you like that?" Margaret smiled without saying a word. She had almost ended up living that kind of life. Fortunately, she saw through that man clearly before marriage and called off the wedding in time. What Margaret never expected was that even after hiding here, that Mistress Jane could still track her down to provoke her. Margaret was startled by the sudden appearance of Jane when she left for work early in the morning. "Margaret, you're truly cunning. All these years, I underestimated you. Who would have thought you'd use a runaway bride scheme to grab his attention? I'm telling you, don't think you've won. I have plenty of ways to steal him back." Jane wore heavy, elaborate makeup and carried herself with arrogant pride, but she'd grown so thin that at first glance, she resembled a skeleton wearing a mask. Margaret glanced at the time. "Move aside, I still have to go to work." Jane wouldn't back down. "Since childhood, there's nothing I've wanted that I couldn't get. Including Vivian. Right now, everyone in the Wordsworth family detests you, even if you've bewitched him. Don't think you'll sit comfortably as Mrs. Franklin, whatever. You'd better snatch him back to the country soon, so I can have a few days of peace." Margaret drove straight to work without giving Jane so much as a second glance. Jane stood frozen in place, feeling as if she'd punched a ball of cotton. She felt that something had changed, but the next second, Jane pulled herself together and slapped her own face hard twice. Then she sent Vivian a video. "Vivian, brother, I'm sorry. I know you love sister. I just wanted to help you. But my sister said she would only forgive you if I died. If that's the case, then I'll just die, if it means you two can be together. What does my life matter?" After sending the message, Jane contentedly walked to the riverbank, subtly revealing her location as if by accident. She believed Vivian wouldn't ignore the video, she just had to wait. But this time, Jane waited until nightfall without seeing Vivian appear. Vivian saw Jane's message. A flicker of anger rose in his heart, and he immediately wanted to confront Margaret for answers. But seeing Margaret laughing and chatting with colleagues over coffee, he instantly lost the courage to approach her. He was afraid of angering Margaret, afraid of pushing Margaret further away. He had neither the time nor the opportunity left. After much deliberation, Vivian called Ted, the special assistant, and asked him to handle the matter. Half an hour later, Ted, the special assistant, called back hesitantly, "Mr. Vivian, I don't think Miss Ding seems suicidal. She might be doing this just to get your attention." During this half hour, Jane alternated between playing with her phone and touching up her makeup. Not a trace of worry could be seen on her face. Vivian was so furious she nearly crushed her phone. At such a critical moment, Jane actually had the nerve to cause trouble. He angrily said to Ted, his assistant, "From now on, handle Jane's matters yourself. Don't let her bother me anymore. Only true feelings can withstand the test of time." During this time, Vivian noticed Jane's unusual behavior, becoming aware of her calculated little schemes to seduce her. Jane didn't seem quite so naive and innocent after all. She had her own hidden little agendas too. That bright, beautiful moon was gradually dimming, yet that beautiful rose was gradually blooming in his heart. Vivian finally realized how precious Margaret's genuine feelings were, so now, rather than trying to appease Jane, he wanted to gaze at Margaret a little longer. Vivian called the waiter over and pointed toward Margaret's direction. "Please send a strawberry cake to their table. But don't say it's from me, just tell them it's part of your store's promotion." The waiter, having received a generous tip, happily agreed. Vivian continued looking in Margaret's direction. The current Margaret is almost completely different from before. She cut her hair into a neat, short style, stopped wearing those fashionable dresses, and dressed in a very professional manner. Every day she was full of energy, with a bright, confident smile on her face. Vivian really liked this version of Margaret. He began to think that once he brought Margaret back to the country, he would arrange for her to be his secretary at the company. This way, he could see the confident and radiant Margaret every day. At the thought of this scene, Vivian couldn't help but smile. When he looked up again, Margaret had already left. The strawberry cake had only been scooped by one colleague, the rest left lonely on the table. Vivian's heart skipped a beat. Many forgotten little things and details surfaced in that moment. He finally remembered. Margaret never liked strawberry cake to begin with. It was because she loved it that Margaret never tired of studying. In truth, she had been suppressing herself all along, accommodating Vivian. Vivian downed the coffee in front of her in one gulp, then stood up and left, the strong black coffee, yet he couldn't taste anything. It seemed as if his entire heart was filled with endless bitterness. On the drive back to his residence, Vivian suddenly thought of many, many things. Those things he had habitually overlooked. Margaret, what did she truly like? What did she dislike? And what did she want most? Vivian thought all night, only managing to fall into a fitful sleep as dawn approached. In his dream, he saw Margaret at 18, her dewy eyes blinking, cheeks flushed. "My greatest wish, of course, is to marry you." He jolted awake instantly. The tears in the dream had already soaked the pillow. Vivian covered her face and began to sob quietly. He remembered everything. He immediately got up and booked the earliest flight back home. Vivian's mom heard that Vivian had returned to the country and immediately summoned him to the Wordsworth residence. Ever since Margaret fled from the wedding, the Wordsworth family had become the laughingstock of their social circle. At such a critical moment, Vivian not only failed to step up and take charge but instead chased after Margaret abroad. Vivian's mom couldn't understand what extraordinary qualities this Margaret possessed. Women who aspire to be Mrs. Franklin are a dime a dozen, yet Vivian can't seem to forget this particular woman. Vivian's mom has made up her mind. The moment Vivian arrives at the Wordsworth residence, she'll immediately arrange a blind date. This time, she's determined to pick a dignified and magnanimous daughter-in-law. But Vivian neither returned to the Wordsworth home nor went to the company. The first thing he did upon returning was rush to Moonview Villa. Pushing open the door and seeing the spotless living room, Vivian flew into a rage. "Who told you to clean the room?" Ted, the assistant, answered, trembling with fear. "It was the old madam's decision. She said the house was in such disarray that it simply didn't look presentable." Vivian clenched her fists, frantically searching for anything Margaret had left behind. Fortunately, Ted the assistant knew better than to casually discard anything related to Margaret. He had the servants carefully organize and store everything away. Vivian turned everything out and examined each item one by one. At last he understood why Margaret had treasured these things so dearly. They contained not only Margaret's memories, but also those of Vivian himself. That was their shared past. Only Margaret wanted nothing. She left everything to Vivian, along with all the sorrow and regret. Vivian gazed at the lone wedding ring, tears slowly falling. "I was wrong. I was truly wrong. No wonder she could never forgive me." He staggered a few steps and knocked over the trash can behind him. A crumpled paper ball rolled out among the scattered garbage. Vivian slowly bent down and picked up the paper ball. Beside her, Ted, the assistant, instinctively moved forward to stop her. He knew Vivian had misophonia, where even the slightest speck of dust could upset Vivian, but he quickly snapped out of it. For Vivian at this moment, anything related to Margaret could become an exception. Ted, the assistant, dared not speak further and quietly retreated outside. Vivian placed the crumpled paper on her lap and carefully smoothed it out. On it was Margaret's delicate handwriting. carrying a decade's worth of longing, wearing the most beautiful wedding dress, marry my beloved Vivian. Vivian's heart ached violently, the wave of anguish impossible to suppress, every breath felt as painful as being cut by a knife. He remembered 18-year-old Margaret, shy yet full of anticipation. He also recalled that night when Margaret saw the damaged wedding dress, the fleeting heartache in her eyes. What had he done? What on earth has he done? This wish calendar has 7 pages in total, and this is the last one. What about the rest? Margaret, what were the other wishes? Vivian frantically searched every corner of the room, unwilling to overlook even the tiniest spot. The villa was enormous, large enough to hold all their memories, yet the villa was also tiny, so small it couldn't accommodate Margaret's single wish. The first 6 pages of the calendar had long been discarded by Margaret, thrown out with the trash and all those wedding items, gone forever. I will find it, I will definitely find it. Vivian stumbled into the study. If it can't be found in reality, then search through memories. He and Margaret had known each other for over 20 years, living together day and night, understanding each other inside out. Could he really not know what Margaret's wish was? Through these familiar surroundings, he searched through memories, bit by bit, for traces of Margaret. He spent an entire day without eating or drinking, restoring those 6 discarded wishes, as she put down the final stroke. Vivian broke into a smile through her tears. He suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. Margaret, I'll repay you double for everything I owe you. Wait for me. On her 29th birthday, Margaret received a gift she would remember for eternity, an $8 million handmade haute couture wedding dress, one of a kind, dazzling and magnificent. Everyone at the birthday party was stunned by this wedding dress. Only Margaret nearly crushed her wine glass after the party ended. Margaret unsurprisingly saw Vivian. Vivian smiled through her tears and said sincerely, Margaret, happy birthday. What are you doing here? Vivian evaded the topic and said, look, how beautiful the night sky is tonight. The night sky was beautiful tonight, but this beauty had nothing to do with Vivian. I've told you before, don't disturb my life again. Vivian acted as if she hadn't heard. Margaret, I know you've always wanted to ride the Ferris wheel. Shall we go tomorrow? If you'd like, I can even build one for you when we get back. I can take you to the arcade and movies every day too. Don't you love stargazing? We could buy a new villa in the hills for our wedding home. It has the best view of the stars in all of Beijing. I'll hire the finest photographer for new wedding photos. If you're willing, I could even have them document our daily life together. Margaret, I'll find a way to fulfill all your wishes. Come home with me, okay? The starry sky is infinitely vast, yet it appears desolate. Gazing at the stars alone, every part of you except your eyes feels lonely. This loneliness, Margaret has tasted too many times. She no longer wants to reminisce. As for those regrets belonged to Vivian alone. She had accomplished most of her wishes alone, and she no longer dwelled on those that remained unfulfilled. Life must always have some regrets for one to learn to cherish the present. Margaret said not another word and turned back to her room. As for everything behind her, it no longer concerned her. Margaret didn't dwell on what happened that night and continued living her life as usual. But Jane, who witnessed everything that night, couldn't bear it. She couldn't stand Margaret living a better life than hers, couldn't bear seeing her years of scheming come to naught at the final moment. What she found most unbearable wasn't Vivian's indifference to her life or death struggles, nor Vivian's refusal to see her. Rather, it was the words Vivian spoke to her on Margaret's birthday. Since childhood, Jane's mom had taught Jane that their wealth and status were stolen from other women. If you want something, you must fight for it yourself. So from childhood, she learned to snatch Margaret's dolls and steal Margaret's share of paternal love. Every year on Margaret's birthday, she would always blow out the candles first, no matter how she bullied Margaret. The moment she cried, everyone would take her side. Margaret eventually stopped resisting and learned to endure the humiliation in silence. She thought she had won, until one time, Jane saw Margaret sneak out of the house and share a strawberry cake with Vivian under the starry sky. Vivian said to Margaret with a smile, Margaret, I'll work hard for you. I'll rely on my own efforts to give you the best life. Margaret smiled and smeared cake on Vivian's face, and the two of them tumbled into playful chaos. That heartfelt smile was something Jane had never experienced before. In that moment, Jane made up her mind, no matter how long it took, she would definitely snatch Vivian away from Margaret. So this time, she absolutely wouldn't allow Vivian to return to Margaret's side again. She thought for a long time and finally came up with a new plan. Since I can't see Vivian, then I'll start with Margaret. Jane put on Vivian's most expensive outfit bought for her, and like a peacock, she found Margaret with high spirits. She threw Vivian's diary right at Margaret's face. I came to tell you 2 things. First, I'm pregnant. Second, Vivian has always loved me. So you'd better give up. Half a month ago, Margaret was desperately eager to know what Vivian truly felt in his heart, but now, she just stepped on it lightly and indifferently. Finish talking. If you're done, then leave. From now on, whether it's you or Vivian, if either of you appears before me again, I'll call the police immediately. Only those who are unhappy with their present keep dwelling on the past. Margaret has a thriving career, a happy family, and a fulfilling life. She has no time to dwell on such things. Jane mistook it as a provocation and reached out to block Margaret. Stop pretending. I refuse to believe you don't care at all. You probably don't know this, but we slept together 8 years ago. You have no idea how amazing he was. He held me and said you were a boring old prude. His kissing skills were extraordinary, but since then, I bet he hasn't kissed you even once, because in his eyes, you could never compare to me. She recounted in meticulous detail everything she had done with Vivian during that period. Margaret's lifelong cherished dreams were nothing more than ordinary daily routines to her. The usually solemn-faced Vivian could freely reveal her wildest and most uninhibited side when with her. Vivian had no time to take the feverish Margaret to the hospital, yet could carry Jane, who had a sprained ankle, across 3 streets. Vivian had no time to accompany Margaret on their honeymoon, yet during their poorest days, they took their jointly saved money and took Jane on a trip. So you see, it's not that he doesn't have time, he just doesn't love you enough. Stop deceiving yourself. In his heart, there's only ever been me. Tears streamed down Jane's face. Not the delicate weeping of pear blossoms glistening with rain, but rather tears long suppressed, now unbearable to contain. Margaret couldn't understand why she was crying, when she herself had said nothing, done nothing. You're absolutely right. Margaret didn't want to waste time here. She had plans to go swimming with friends. As for Vivian and who she loved, she had long stopped caring. On the day she said goodbye to Vivian, she had already figured it all out. All that talk about white moonlight and red roses, it was nothing but desire at play. Vivian truly loves only himself. He wants a virtuous and devoted wife who loves him wholeheartedly and takes care of all his needs. Yet he also desires a passionate lover to satisfy his desires and bring him thrilling new experiences. But Vivian prides himself on being morally upright, too afraid to admit or confront his true desires. He could only romanticize Jane as an unattainable white moonlight, as if with this filter, those sordid affairs could be glorified into sincere love. They had known each other for over 20 years. Margaret knew Vivian inside out, able to see right through him at a glance. All that came before was merely blindness caused by love. Margaret's indifferent attitude infuriated Jane. She couldn't bear such contempt, having prepared herself for a life-or-death struggle. How could she allow the other party to win this war without lifting a finger? A surge of immense fury robbed her of reason in an instant. Seeing Margaret walk to the roadside, Jane directly reached out and pushed her toward the oncoming car. Margaret, Vivian came rushing from nowhere, pulling Margaret into her arms, letting her lower back slam straight into the fire hydrant. It all happened too fast and too suddenly. Margaret was completely unprepared. As she struggled to calm down and was about to demand accountability, she saw Vivian slap Jane hard across the face. Jane, who gave you permission to hurt Margaret? Vivian grabbed Jane by the throat, her eyes even flashing with murderous intent. Margaret, fearing that passers-by might call the police, yanked Vivian away. I don't care what you're trying to do, but don't drag me into it. I don't have time to waste on you people. Jane turned red in the face, gasping for breath, yet she still had to suppress her fear and grievances, putting on a pitiful appearance. Vivian, brother, you've misunderstood. It was sister. Enough. Vivian glared at Jane through gritted teeth. How long do you plan to keep lying to me? This morning, Ted, the special assistant, had already secretly investigated Jane's past thoroughly. She was never that pure and flawless white moonlight. Since high school, she's had messy relationships with men. Any man who showed Margaret the slightest affection, Jane would find ways to lure them into bed. Vivian was just one of them. As for that chance encounter, it wasn't at all what Jane claimed about working her way through school. She had eloped with a poor musician, then ran away when she couldn't endure the hardship. After hearing Vivian was nearby, she meticulously planned the chance meeting. When Vivian learned the truth, she was nearly driven mad with rage, but he had no time to dwell on the matter now. All he wanted was to find Margaret and clarify what had happened back then. Unexpectedly, I accidentally saved Margaret. Jane, stop pretending. You never loved me, you just wanted to seduce me to hurt Margaret. I must have been blind to lose someone who truly loved me for a woman like you. Margaret watched the two before her with mixed emotions. The three of them had been entangled with each other for over 20 years. One was the person she had once loved most, the other was the one she had once hated most. But now, the one she had loved seemed so ridiculous, and the one she had hated appeared so pitiful. For Jane, Her world consisted of nothing but endless battles. Without love, nor knowing what love is, she could only see all women as imaginary rivals, considering the theft of a worthless man as victory. Completely forgetting that beyond those men lies a vaster world. And Vivian, what about her? A pretentious, greedy, hypocritical, and selfish beast in human clothing. Margaret looked at Vivian and said word by word, "You make me sick." With that, Margaret turned to leave. A police car, however, blocked her path. The commotion just now was too loud, and some passers-by secretly called the police. Margaret was also taken to the police station for questioning. She originally intended to hold Jane accountable, but there were no surveillance cameras on that road section, and without valid evidence, the matter had to be dropped. However, Vivian's assault on Jane was witnessed by many people, making it possible to convict her according to the law, but Jane stubbornly refused to admit it. "He's my lover, we were just playing around, he loves me too much, that's why he hit me in the heat of the moment, I don't blame him." The police and Margaret exchanged a glance, both feeling speechless at the same time. In the end, Vivian, though not held accountable, was classified as a key surveillance subject. Margaret's swimming plans were completely ruined. Just as she was about to take a taxi home, she spotted Margaret's mom rushing over in a frantic hurry. "Are you alright? Were you hurt?" "I'm fine. Let's go home." Margaret smiled and took Margaret's mom's arm. Margaret's mom glared fiercely at Jane and Vivian. "Let me tell you, the Fang family today is not what it used to be. I won't allow anyone to hurt my daughter on my turf, nor will I allow anyone to take her away from me. Next time, I swear I'll make every single one of you pay the price you deserve." With that, she stormed off with Margaret in tow. Outside the police station, Margaret nestled into Margaret's mom's arms coquettishly. "Mom, you were so cool just now," Margaret's mom said with both doting and reproach. "You, with a driver at your disposal, still insist on going out alone. If anything were to happen to you, what would I do? From now on, whenever you go out, either take the driver with you or bring a bodyguard." "Alright, I'll listen to you." Margaret's mom remained on edge for a long time, terrified that Vivian and Jane might reappear to harm Margaret. Fortunately, neither of them appeared for a long time afterward. Margaret stopped dwelling on these matters. Friends back home told her that the Wordsworth household was currently in complete turmoil. Several shareholders were secretly acquiring stocks to oust Vivian, while other prominent families were eyeing the Wordsworths with predatory intent. Vivian has most likely already returned to her home country, Margaret sighed. Initially, she hadn't intended to let things escalate this far, but some things are like dominoes. She toppled the first piece, yet couldn't control the chain reaction that followed. "Margaret, what are you thinking about?" A colleague's voice interrupted Margaret's reverie. "Nothing. How's the project on your hands coming along?" "There's just too much work to finish. Looks like we'll be pulling overtime again this period." Margaret smiled self-deprecatingly. She had more than enough on her own plate. How could she possibly spare energy for other people's messes? The Wordsworth family's affairs were, after all, Vivian's own doing. People must always pay the price for their actions. Sometimes retribution is merely delayed, not denied. Margaret put these thoughts aside and threw herself back into her work. With time pressing and tasks piling up, Margaret wished she could just live at the office. Margaret's mom ached for her daughter, yet refused to spoil her into a hothouse flower. She could only secretly leverage her years of accumulated connections to pave the way for Margaret. Margaret lost herself in work, often burning the midnight oil, forgetting everything when caught up in the grind. Many times, she was the last one to slowly walk out of the company gate after everyone else had left. This time, Margaret checked the time. It was almost 2 o'clock. At this hour, it was hard to hail a taxi. Margaret had no choice but to walk part of the way. The late-night streets were deserted, and the streetlights flickered intermittently, as if suffering from poor contact. Margaret noticed a slender shadow appearing beside her and instinctively became more alert. As they passed by a grove of trees, the figure suddenly rushed forward and tightly embraced Margaret. Margaret was frightened out of her wits and struggled desperately. When her struggles proved futile, she could only plead incessantly, "Don't hurt me, I have money, I can give you all the money I have." She tried desperately to stay calm, but her body still trembled with fear. Tears fell drop by drop. Landing on the man's hand, Margaret felt the man's hand flinch slightly, then tighten around her even more forcefully, as if afraid she might escape. Margaret dared not move another muscle, desperately trying to think of a way out. Just then, the streetlight flickered. Terrified, Margaret caught sight of the familiar birthmark on the other's chest. Margaret spoke in disbelief, "Vivian." In an instant, Vivian froze completely. Margaret finally snapped back to reality. She pushed Vivian away with all her strength, and after confirming it was indeed him, she slapped him with every ounce of power in her body. "Vivian, Have you lost your mind? What were you trying to do to me? You're insane. Worse than an animal. Vivian's face flushed red on one side, but he wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled slightly, then took Margaret's hand in his and gently blew on it. Margaret, don't be afraid, I would never hurt you, I just want to take you home. Vivian had lost everything. The white moonlight he had yearned for over 8 years was fake, and the Franklin group he had strived to build for a decade was ready to abandon him at any moment. In this world, only Margaret ever truly loved him. Without Margaret, he would have nothing left, so he wanted him. But all he truly desired was her. Margaret recoiled in disgust from Vivian's touch, her face filled with loathing as she glared at him. After all these years, Margaret knew Vivian was stubborn to the core, but she never imagined Vivian could be so obsessive, so utterly deranged. Margaret was practically slumped against the wall, the terror of that life-and-death moment leaving her barely able to stand. Tears brimming with boundless terror slowly streamed from her eyes. Vivian's heart ached violently. He never intended to hurt Margaret, let alone deliberately frighten her. Today he received news that the board of directors was preparing to collectively remove him from his position. Distraught, drowning sorrows in alcohol, stimulated by the liquor, his longing for Margaret nearly reached its peak. Uncontrollably, he just wanted to see her. Margaret, I'm sorry. Come back with me, let's abandon everything from the past and start over. Alright, the outside world is so dangerous, only I can protect you. I've figured it out, I'll handle Jane this trouble. The truth is I never truly loved her. I was just repressed for too long and momentarily deceived. I understand, Vivian. Could you give me a little more time? Margaret soothed while secretly using her phone to send a distress message to Margaret's mom. She didn't dare provoke Vivian. Fearing she might do something drastic again, Vivian felt a surge of hope upon hearing these words. He looked at Margaret like a child. Alright, Margaret, as long as you're willing to forgive me. I'll wait however long it takes, Margaret whispered softly. It won't be too long. Before long, Margaret's mom arrived with others in tow. She swung her Birkin bag, striking Vivian squarely in the face. The police officers behind her promptly restrained Vivian. Vivian looked at Margaret and murmured, "You lied to me. You never forgave me, Margaret. Why would you do this? Don't you understand? I love you." Margaret leaned into Margaret's mom's embrace, her voice trembling yet her heart unwavering with resolve. "I will never forgive you, and I never want to see you again. If you ever appear before me again, I will shoot you without hesitation." Vivian was detained by the police, and as soon as his identity was verified, it immediately caused an uproar both domestically and internationally. The Wordsworth family and Mr. Fang all rushed to negotiate at the first opportunity. Vivian's mom was utterly heartbroken and wept uncontrollably, while Mr. Franklin offered a substantial compensation in hopes of reaching a settlement. In this matter, our Wordsworth family was at fault first. We hope Ms. Fang and Miss Fang will consider our past relationship. Margaret's mom unceremoniously tore the letter of understanding to shreds and let out a cold laugh. "You've made mistake after mistake, bullying my daughter to this extent. Do you really think I'm someone to be trifled with? Let me tell you, our Fang family doesn't care for your paltry money." Beside them, Vivian's mom immediately pointed at Margaret and began berating her. "You shameless wretch, publicly jilting your groom without an ounce of shame, and now colluding with outsiders to try and ruin the Wordsworth family. Vivian, how could you fall in love with someone like you? How could your heart be so cruel? He loved you so much, and the Wordsworth family treated you well too. How could you bear to be so ruthless to your former lover?" Seeing Vivian's mom getting increasingly out of line, Mr. Franklin quickly had her dragged away, continuing to apologize earnestly to Margaret. The dragged away Vivian's mom was still hurling curses. The ever-silent Vivian suddenly spoke up. "Margaret was not wrong. The one who was wrong is me." Vivian looked at Margaret, her gaze trembling. He had made too many mistakes, and they were far too grave. It was his insatiable greed, his failure to cherish, his selfishness that disregarded Margaret's feelings. He thought he loved Margaret deeply, yet he only cared about his own feelings, never truly understanding what she wanted. Thus, he was destined to grow further and further apart from Margaret. After realizing this, Vivian's tears fell once again. He lowered his head. "Margaret, I dare not ask for your forgiveness. I only beg you, don't forget me. Even if it's hatred, just don't forget me." Father Fang was so anxious he was spinning in circles, yet didn't dare utter a word. They thought climbing onto the Wordsworth family's coattails would bring prosperity, but instead the eldest daughter ran away and the youngest was ruined. All their schemes came to nothing. Wordsworth family became their sworn enemies for generations. Father Fang couldn't help but glance at Margaret's mom. Years had passed, yet she appeared more beautiful and radiant than ever. As for Jane's mom, what use was her youthful charm? 20 years had aged her too. Father Fang couldn't resist the urge to approach Margaret's mom, but her icy stare made him retreat. He could only steal furtive glances at Margaret's mom from the corner of his eye. Margaret took in the entire scene. She knew that Father Fang probably regretted it too. For some people, what they can't have and what they've lost forever are the best. The Wordsworth family had nearly exhausted their fortune over Vivian's affairs. After extensive negotiations, Vivian paid a hefty compensation and was deported back to her home country. At the moment of parting, Vivian gazed longingly at Margaret. As if deceiving herself, she asked, "Will we meet again?" Margaret answered without hesitation, "Never." She had already obtained a restraining order, after which Vivian could no longer appear by her side. Once lovers, now separated by the ends of the earth, never to meet again. Vivian suddenly burst into tears. In front of everyone, she wept bitterly, utterly at a loss. "Why is this happening? Margaret, you've been by my side for so long that I thought you'd never leave me. So long that I believed you'd forgive me no matter what I did. I never imagined that one day you would leave without a sound, nor did I think I would lose you forever. After you left, I realized the whole world had changed. I didn't mean to hurt you, I just couldn't resist the temptation. When I came to my senses, I knew I wouldn't choose Jane, yet I couldn't let go of Jane's wildness. That's why I tried to mold you into her image. I thought this way, I could have you both. But I forgot." He forgot there's only one Margaret in this world. Whether she is good or bad, she is a unique existence. She cannot tolerate any flaws, let alone settle for being a substitute. Listening to Vivian's heartfelt words, Margaret felt not a ripple of emotion. She had long anticipated it. The irony was, Vivian only now saw clearly into her own heart. Margaret linked arms with Margaret's mom preparing to leave. Vivian continued sobbing uncontrollably. "I really don't understand how things could have turned out this way. I saw the wish list you wrote on the calendar. Coming here this time, I thought even if I couldn't take you home, making up for some regrets would be good. I never expected things to turn out like this. The unfinished wedding, the unshot wedding photos, the Ferris wheel never ridden, the love story left incomplete, 20 years of acquaintance, 10 years of love. Looking back, every little moment is filled with regret. Those dates on the calendar are no longer Margaret's wishes, but his Vivian's torment." The sky was clear, without a single cloud. Vivian watched in despair as Margaret, bathed in sunlight, walked step by step toward the light that belonged to her. Thus resolutely and unyieldingly, she walked out of Vivian's world. Not once did she look back.